Chapter 23. Master the Art of the Bold Move. A moment has arrived. Your victim clearly desires you, but is not ready to admit it openly, let alone act on it. This is the time to throw aside chivalry, kindness, and coquetry, and to overwhelm with a bold move. Don't give the victim time to consider the consequences. Create conflict, stir up tension so that the bold move comes as a great release. Showing hesitation or awkwardness means you're thinking of yourself as opposed to being overwhelmed by the victim's charms. Never hold back or meet the target halfway, under the belief that you're being correct and considerate. You must be seductive now, not political. One person must go on the offensive, and it is you. The perfect climax. Through a campaign of deception, the misleading appearance of a transformation into goodness, the rake Valmont laid siege to the virtuous young Présidente de Tourvel, until the day came when, disturbed by his confession of love for her, she insisted he leave the chateau where both of them were staying as guests. He complied. From Paris, however, he flooded her with letters, describing his love for her in the most intense terms. She begged him to stop, and once again, he complied. Then, several weeks later, he paid a surprise visit to the chateau. In his company, Tourvel was flushed and jumpy and kept her eyes averted, all signs of his effect on her. Again, she asked him to leave. "What have you to fear?" he replied. "I have always done what you asked. I have never forced myself on you." He kept his distance, and she slowly relaxed. She no longer left the room when he entered, and she could look at him directly. When he offered to accompany her on a walk, she didn't refuse. They were friends, she said. She even put her arm in his as they strolled, a friendly gesture. One rainy day, they could not take their usual walk. He met her in the hallway as she was entering her room. For the first time, she invited him in. She seemed relaxed, and Valmont sat near her on a sofa. He talked of his love for her. She gave the faintest protest. He took her hand. She left it there and leaned against his arm. Her voice trembled. She looked at him, and he felt his heart flutter. It was a tender, loving look. She started to speak. "Well, yes, then suddenly collapsed into his arms, crying. It was a moment of weakness, yet Valmont held himself back. Her crying became convulsive. She begged him to help her to leave the room before something terrible happened. He did so. The following morning he awoke to some surprising news. In the middle of the night, claiming she was feeling ill, Tourvel had suddenly left the chateau and returned home. Valmont didn't follow her to Paris. Instead, he began staying up late and using no powder to hide the piqued looks that soon ensued. He went to the chapel every day and dragged himself despondently around the chateau. He knew that his hostess would be writing to the Présidente, who would hear of his sad state. Next, he wrote to a church father in Paris and asked him to pass along a message to Tourvel. He was ready to change his life for good. He wanted one last meeting to say goodbye and to return the letters she had written him over the last few months. The father arranged a meeting, and so one late afternoon in Paris, Valmont found himself once again alone with Tourvel in a room in her house. The Présidente was clearly on edge, but she couldn't look him in the eye. They exchanged pleasantries, but then Valmont turned harsh. She had treated him cruelly, had apparently been determined to make him unhappy. Well, this was the end. They were separating for good, since that was how she wanted it. Tourvel argued back. She was a married woman. She had no choice. Valmont softened his tone and apologized. He was unused to having such strong feelings, he said, and could not control himself. Still, he would never trouble her again. Then he laid on a table the letters he had come to return. Tourvel came closer. The sight of her letters and the memory of all the turmoil they represented affected her powerfully. She had thought his decision to renounce his libertine way of life was voluntary, she said, with a touch of bitterness in her voice, as if she resented being abandoned. No, it wasn't voluntary, he replied. It was because she had spurned him. Then he suddenly stepped closer and took her in his arms. She did not resist. "Adorable woman," he cried. "You have no idea of the love you inspire. You will never know how I have worshipped you, how much dearer my feelings have been to me than life. May your days be blessed with all of the happiness of which you have deprived me." Then he let her go and turned to leave. Tourvel suddenly snapped. "You shall listen to me. I insist," she said, and grabbed his arm. He turned around and they embraced. This time, he waited no longer, picking her up, carrying her to an ottoman, overwhelming her with kisses and sweet words of the happiness he now felt. Before this sudden flood of caresses, all her resistance gave way. "From this moment on, I am yours," she said, "and you will hear neither refusals nor regrets from my lips." Tourvel was true to her word, and Valmont's suspicions were to prove correct. The pleasures he won from her were far greater than with any other woman he had seduced. Interpretation. Valmont, a character in Chauderlot de Laclos' 18th century novel Dangerous Liaisons, can sense several things about the Présidente at first glance. She is timid and nervous. Her husband almost certainly treats her with respect, probably too much of it. Beneath her interest in God, religion, and virtue is a passionate woman, vulnerable to the lure of romance and to the flattering attention of an ardent suitor. No one, not even her husband, has given her this feeling because they have all been so daunted by her prudish exterior. Valmont begins his seduction, then, by being indirect. He knows Tourvel is secretly fascinated with his bad reputation. By acting as if he is contemplating a change in his life, he can make her want to reform him, a desire that is unconsciously a desire to love him. Once she has opened up ever so slightly to his influence, he strikes at her vanity. She has never felt desired as a woman, and on some level cannot help but enjoy his love for her. Of course, she struggles and resists, but that is only a sign that her emotions are engaged. Indifference is the single most effective deterrent to seduction. By taking his time, by making no bold moves even when he has the opportunity for them, he instills in her a false sense of security and proves himself by being patient. On what he pretends is his last visit to her, however, he can sense she's ready. Weak, confused, more afraid of losing the addictive feeling of being desired than of suffering the consequences of adultery. He deliberately makes her emotional, dramatically displays her letters, creates some tension by playing a game of push and pull, and when she takes his arm, he knows it is the time to strike. Now he moves quickly, allowing her no time for doubts or second thoughts. But his move seems to arise out of love, not lust. After so much resistance and tension, what a pleasure to finally surrender. The climax now comes as a great release. Never underestimate the role of vanity in love and seduction. If you seem impatient, champing at the bit for sex, you signal that it's all about libido and that it has little to do with the target's own charms. That is why you must defer the climax. A lengthier courtship will feed the target's vanity and will make the effect of your bold move all the more powerful and enduring. Wait too long, though, showing desire but then proving too timid to make your move, and you will stir up a different kind of insecurity. You found me desirable, but you're not acting on your desires. Maybe you're not so interested. Doubts like these affront your target's vanity. If you're not interested, maybe I'm not so interesting, and are fatal in the latter stages of seduction. Awkwardness and misunderstandings will spring up everywhere. Once you read in your target's gestures that they are ready and open, a look in the eye, mirroring behavior, a strange nervousness in your presence, you must go on the offensive. Make them feel that their charms have unhinged you and pushed you into the bold move. They will then have the ultimate pleasure, physical surrender, and a psychological boost to their vanity. Keys to seduction. Think of seduction as a world you enter, a world that is separate and distinct from the real world. The rules are different here. What works in daily life can have the opposite effect in seduction. The real world features a democratizing, leveling impulse in which everything has to seem at least something like equal. An overt imbalance of power, an overt desire for power, will stir envy and resentment. We learn to be kind and polite, at least on the surface. Even those who have power generally try to act humble and modest. They don't want to offend. In seduction, on the other hand, you can throw all of that out. Revel in your dark side. Inflict a little pain. In some ways, be more yourself. Your naturalness in this respect will prove seductive in itself. The problem is that after years of living in the real world, we lose the ability to be ourselves. We become timid, humble, over-polite. Your task is to regain some of your childhood qualities, to root out all this false humility. And the most important quality to recapture is boldness. No one is born timid. Timidity is a protection we develop. If we never stick our necks out, if we never try, we will never have to suffer the consequences of failure or success. If we're kind and unobtrusive, no one will be offended. In fact, we will seem saintly and likable. In truth, timid people are often self-absorbed, obsessed with the way people see them, and not at all saintly. And humility may have its social uses, but it is deadly in seduction. You need to be able to play the humble saint at times. It is a mask you wear. But in seduction, take it off. Boldness is bracing, erotic, and absolutely necessary to bring the seduction to its conclusion. Done right, it tells your targets that they have made you lose your normal restraint and gives them license to do so as well. People are yearning to have a chance to play out the repressed sides of their personality. At the final stage of a seduction, boldness eliminates any awkwardness or doubts. In a dance, two people cannot lead. One takes over, sweeping the other along. Seduction is not egalitarian. It's not a harmonic convergence. Holding back at the end out of fear of offending or thinking it correct to share the power is a recipe for disaster. This is an arena not for politics, but for pleasure. It can be by the man or woman, but a bold move is required. If you are so concerned about the other person, console yourself with the thought that the pleasure of the one who surrenders is often greater than that of the aggressor. As a young man, the actor Errol Flynn was uncontrollably bold. This often got him into trouble. He became too aggressive around desirable women. Then, while traveling through the Far East, he became interested in the Asian practice of tantric sex, in which the male must train himself not to ejaculate, preserving his potency and heightening both partners' pleasure in the process. Flynn later applied this principle to his seductions as well, teaching himself to restrain his natural boldness and delay the end of the seduction as long as possible. So, while boldness can work wonders, uncontrollable boldness is not seductive, but frightening. You need to be able to turn it on and off at will, know when to use it. As in Tantrism, you can create more pleasure by delaying the inevitable. In the 1720s, the Duc de Richelieu developed an infatuation with a certain duchess. The woman was exceptionally beautiful and was desired by one and all, but she was far too virtuous to take a lover, although she could be quite coquettish. Richelieu bided his time. He befriended her, charming her with the wit that had made him the favorite of the ladies. One night, a group of such women, including the Duchess, decided to play a practical joke on him in which he was to be forced naked out of his room at the Palace of Versailles. The joke worked to perfection. The ladies all got to see him in his native glory and had a good chuckle watching him run away. There were many places Richelieu could have hidden. The place he chose was the Duchess's bedroom. Minutes later, he watched her enter and undress, and once the candles were extinguished, he crept into bed with her. She protested, tried to scream. He covered her mouth with kisses, and she eventually and happily relented. Richelieu had decided to make his bold move then for several reasons. First, the Duchess had come to like him and even to harbor a secret desire for him. She would never act upon it or admit it, but he was certain it existed. Second, she had seen him naked and could not help but be impressed. Third, she would feel a touch of pity for his predicament and for the joke played on him. Richelieu, a consummate seducer, would find no more perfect moment. The bold move should come as a pleasant surprise, but not too much of a surprise. Learn to read the signs that the target is falling for you. His or her manner toward you will have changed. It will be more pliant, with more words and gestures mirroring yours, yet there will still be a touch of nervousness and uncertainty. Inwardly, they have given in to you, but they don't expect a bold move. This is the time to strike. If you wait too long, to the point where they consciously desire and expect you to make a move, it loses the piquancy of coming as a surprise. You want a degree of tension and ambivalence so that the move represents a great release. Their surrender will relieve tension like a long-awaited summer storm. Don't plan your bold move in advance. It cannot seem calculated. Wait for the opportune moment, as Richelieu did. Be attentive to favorable circumstances. This will give you room to improvise and go with the moment, which will heighten the impression you want to create of being suddenly overwhelmed by desire. If you ever sense that the victim is expecting the bold move, take a step back. Lull them into a false sense of security, then strike. Sometime in the 15th century, the writer Bandello relates, a young Venetian widow had a sudden lust for a handsome nobleman. She had her father invite him to their palace to discuss business, but during the meeting the father had to leave, and she offered to give the young man a tour of the place. His curiosity was piqued by her bedroom, which she described as the most splendid room in the palace, but which she also passed by without letting him enter. He begged to be shown the room, and she granted his wish. He was spellbound. The velvets, the rare objets, the suggestive paintings, the delicate white candle. A beguiling scent filled the room. The widow put out all of the candles but one, then led the man to the bed, which had been heated with a warming pan. He quickly succumbed to her caresses. Follow the widow's example. Your bold move should have a theatrical quality to it. That will make it memorable and make your aggressiveness seem pleasant, part of the drama. The theatricality can come from the setting, an exotic or sensual location. It can also come from your actions. The widow piqued her victim's curiosity by creating the suspense about her bedroom. An element of fear, someone might find you, say, will heighten the tension. Remember, you're creating a moment that must stand out from the sameness of daily life. Keeping your targets emotional will both weaken them and heighten the drama of the moment, and the best way to keep them at an emotional pitch is by infecting them with emotions of your own. When Valmont wanted the President to become calm, angry, or tender, he showed that emotion first, and she mirrored it. People are very susceptible to the moods of those around them. This is particularly acute at the latter stages of a seduction, when resistance is low and the target has fallen under your spell. At the point of the bold move, learn to infect your target with whatever emotional mood you require, as opposed to suggesting the mood with words. You want access to the target's unconscious, which is best obtained by infecting them with emotions, bypassing their conscious ability to resist. It may seem expected for the male to make the bold move, but history is full of successfully bold females. There are two main forms of feminine boldness. In the first, more traditional form, the coquettish woman stirs male desire, is completely in control, then at the last minute, after bringing her victim to a boil, steps back and lets him make the bold move. She sets it up, then signals with her eyes, her gestures, that she is ready for him. Courtesans have used this method throughout history. It's how Cleopatra worked on Antony, how Josephine seduced Napoleon, how La Belle Otero amassed a fortune during the Belle Epoque. It lets the man maintain his masculine illusions, although the woman is really the aggressor. The second form of feminine boldness doesn't bother with such illusions. The woman simply takes charge, initiates the first kiss, pounces on her victim. This is how Marguerite de Valois, Lou Andrea Salome, and Madame Mao operated. And many men find it not emasculating at all, but very exciting. It all depends on the insecurities and proclivities of the victim. This kind of feminine boldness has its allure because it is more rare than the first kind, but then all boldness is somewhat rare. A bold move will always stand out compared to the usual treatment afforded by the tepid husband, the timid lover, the hesitant suitor. That is how you want it. If everyone were bold, boldness would quickly lose its allure. Reversal. If two people come together by mutual consent, that is not a seduction. There is no reversal.